Hey, Frog Army. This is Kombat-Frog, your host. It's time for story time. Story time. We're gonna read some scary stories, tell in the dark. This story is called "The Windago." A wealthy man wanted to go hunting in the part of northern Canada where few people had ever hunted. He traveled to a trading post and tried to find a guide to take him, but no one would. It was too dangerous. It was too dangerous, they said. Finally, he found an Indian who needed money badly and agreed to take him. The Indian's name was Defago. They made camp in the snow near a large frozen lake. For 3 days they hunted, but they had nothing to show for it. The third night, a windstorm came up. They lay in their tent, listening to the wind howling and the trees whipping back and forth. To see the storm better, the hunter opened the tent flap. What he saw startled him. There wasn't a breath of air stirring, and the trees were standing perfectly still. Yet he could hear the wind howling, and more he listened, the more it sounded as if it were calling, Defago, Defago, it called. I must be losing my mind, the hunter thought. But Defago had gotten out of sleep, out of his sleeping bag. He was huddled in the corner of the tent, his head buried in his arms. What's what's this all about? The hunter asked. It's nothing, Defago said. But the wind continued to call his name. Defago became more tense, more restless. Defago, it called. Defago. Suddenly, he jumped to his feet and began to run from the tent, but the hunter grabbed him, wrestled him to the ground. You can't leave me out here, the hunter shouted. Then the wind called again, and Defago broke loose and ran into the darkness. The hunter could hear him screaming as he went, as he went. Again and again he cried, "Oh, my fiery feet, my burning feet! No, my burning feet are of fire." Okay. Then his voice faded away, and the wind died down. At daybreak, the hunter followed Defago's tracks in the snow, and they went through the woods, down towards the lake, then on then out onto the ice. But soon he noticed something strange. The steps Defago had gotten longer and longer. They were so long, no human being could have taken them. It was as if something had helped him hurry away. The hunter followed the tracks out into the middle of the lake, but there, there they disappeared. At first, he thought that Defago had fallen through the ice, but something had pulled him off the ice and maybe into the sky. But that made no sense as he stood wondering what had happened. The wind picked up again. Soon it was howling as it was that night before, and then he heard Defago's voice. It was coming from above. And again he heard Defago scream, "My fiery feet, my burning feet," but there was nothing to be seen. Now the hunter wanted to leave that place as fast as he could. He went back to camp, packed, then he left some food for Defago, and he started out. Weeks later, he reached civilization. The following year, he went back to the hunt. In this, that in sorry, the following year, he went back to hunt in that same area. He went to the same trading post to look for a guide. The people there could not explain what had happened to DeFago that night, but they had not seen him since. Maybe it was the Wendigo, one of them said. He laughed. It's supposed to come up in it's supposed to come up with the wind, and it drags you along at great speed until your feet burn away, and more of you than that. Then it crazies you. Oh, whoops, my bad. Carries you into the sky and drops you. But just a crazy story. See, guys, real quick. Oh, I don't know. Right there. Carrie and Crazy are right underneath each other. I'm sorry about that. I just had to show you. Um, so it's just a crazy story, but that's what some of the Indians say. A few days later, the hunter was at the trading post again. An Indian came in and sat by the fire. He had a blanket wrapped around him, and he wore his hat so that you couldn't see his face. The hunter thought there was something familiar about him. He walked over and asked, "Are you DeFago?" The Indian did not answer. "Do you know anything about him?" Still, no answer. He began to wonder if something was wrong, if the man needed help, but he couldn't see his face. And, he couldn't see his face. "Are you all right?" he asked. Still, no reply. To get a look at him, he lifted the Indian's hat. He screamed. There was nothing under his hat but a pile of ash. Oof. Well, that was a pretty dang good story. So, if you guys like that video, please give me a thumbs up. If you want more of this content, don't forget to hit that notification bell along with that subscribe button so you guys can see the latest video. I try to upload one of these once a day. I try to get it in the morning. Usually not this early. It's around like 10 or 11, sometimes later in the day. It all depends on what's going on. So, anyway, this has been Story Time with your host, Kombat-Frog. Please return for tomorrow if you'd like to hear the story of Home Sweet Home, the Dead Man's Brain. This has been your host, Kombat-Frog, signing off.